Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce you. Good evening. I'd like to introduce you to my informative topic I'd like to teach you about today. One of my passions of learning, preferably one of my favorite historical topics to learn about, is naval warfare. Primarily, the development and evolution of how naval ships and vessels progressed from the ancient times to modern times. By the way, USS Iowa, favorite naval ship in history. I'll explain that later. First, we have to go back all the way to the ancient times, during the Greek and Persian times. In that time, the primary naval vessel was called the trireme. It consisted of a long hull, various oars, a sail, and sometimes at the front would be a hardened wooden or bronze spike. And the primary purpose of this type of vessel, it was not to break the opponent vessel, but more to flip it. At that time, naval warfare was still very new, and it was still in the development. But as time progresses, it advanced to something as we call the modern schooner. A modern schooner is, as you can, if you basically just think of the basic stereotypical idea of a pirate ship, or just a basic stereotypical pirate ship. Just think of that. That is what a typical schooner was looking like. At that time, naval warfare was limited by three things. Windage, basically how fast the winds could blow. The ship hull design, so basically how sleek the ship hull would be able to cut through the waves. And the amount of armament that the ships would be able to carry. A typical warship, not a battleship, but a warship at that time, would carry up to anywhere from 60 to 100 guns. And these were typically called man-of-wars. They were designed specifically for warfare. Anything less than that is basically were more used as support roles. They were just meant to bring in supplies to the warring area. But that all changed right around the end of World War II, around 1863. The Battle of the Mermont and Monitor. This is a truly iconic moment in naval warfare, because this was the first time that two ships of iron were basically in combat. It was a draw, though, each side believing that the other was retreating for their own personal needs. But it was a draw, but it was the first time that naval warships were going to be, and from then on, going to be made completely out of metal. This now brings us to the time of the dreadnoughts, World War I. A dreadnought is it's not the typical battleship, as we say, but it's a little bit underdeveloped. Essentially, all it is a giant hull, lumbering hull, and massive guns on it. But they were typically very slow and luggy. The point of a dreadnought was specifically to put heavy artillery on the target and destroy opponent naval warships. But there was also a problem with it, because during the times of World War I, the development of the torpedo was invented, and also the development of the airplane. But I will get to the development of airplane in naval combat later. The torpedo was truly a menace to ships, specifically the dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts, being slow and lumbering, lacked the maneuverability to maneuver out of the way of a torpedo. So when a torpedo would hit the side of a dreadnought, it would sink it. It was almost certain death for a dreadnought. Now let's fast forward all the way to World War II. This is the iconic moment of what we call the battleship age. This is when battleships, not dreadnoughts, were available. Battleships were more developed than a dreadnought. They were better armament. had more sophisticated gunneries. Gunneries essentially just means that more sophisticated ways to shoot the guns and be more accurate. And also better flood control and, of course, better torpedo resistance. But still, battleships, now dreadnoughts, battleships were still lacking. Now in World War II, this is where we see the development and more variety of different ships. We start from submarines, which were more on the stealth and reconnaissance role, but they were rather slow. At that time, in World War II, the U-boats, which were the best submarines, they were not the best underwater. They could only go underwater to do a stealth attack, but then they would have to come up because they lacked maneuverability. Now we're going to go to the submarine's bane, the destroyer. The point of a destroyer is to be fast, mobile, and to be able to put torpedoes and depth charges, which were designed to destroy submarines. Of course, you can tell that World War II naval combat, that's my favorite. After the destroyer, we get something called the cruiser. The cruiser's main role was multi-roles. It could do the role of a battleship, it could do the role of a destroyer. It was essentially supposed to be a multi-role platform. Now we're going to my favorites, the battleships, the iconic ones. Battleships, like the dreadnoughts, but more developed and they had better armament, gunnery, and armor, were designed to put the biggest ordnance possible on the target, no matter the size of it, and even if it got damaged, the point of a battleship was to take that damage and to send it back. But sadly, during World War II was the end of the age of the battleship. And this is where, also in World War II, we see the development of the aircraft carrier. It was then seen that the aircraft carrier, I previously mentioned that aircrafts would be used. Now, after World War II, aircraft carriers were seen to be much more effective because an aircraft could go much further than a submarine, so it could do the reconnaissance needed. It could launch ordnance much faster than any ship, and it could scout and come back and defend the carrier group. Carrier groups are just basically the carrier or task forces, either one or the same terminology. So after World War II, we come to the Cold War. And this is where we see the jet ages, but this is where naval combat went a little bit away from the idea of the big guns of the traditional battleships. And now we go on to the age of the information technology. This is where we see the in-depth missile technology that is used. The anti-missile and ballistic missile technologies that basically are supposed to go against ships and defend. Nowadays, if you were to literally shoot at a ship, it doesn't matter what. You could shoot it with a 50 BMG rifle. It would penetrate right through it. Nowadays, ships, they're not defended by thick plates of armor. They're defended by what's called arm-to-arm, which means if an opponent launches a missile, the task force launches missiles of their own to defend against. The Mark V 5-inch gun, it's still used nowadays. It's very, very effective, very accurate. And now, the next big gun tech is going to be the EMP gun. The EMP gun. The EMP gun essentially is an electromagnetic pulse gun. Essentially, what it does is it takes a metallic object, launches it at supersonic speeds, and it's able to be much more accurate and able to hit ballistic missiles. As I said, sadly, the age of the battleships is no longer, but hopefully with the EMP gun, we can bring back that age. Thank you very much, and I really, really enjoyed explaining to you this. Hopefully, if you have any more questions, please don't be afraid to ask them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.